for a look at the morning's front pages, and with us to look through them are the journalist and author Janelle Aldred and the academic Joanna Williams. Janelle, good morning to you both. With you in a moment, but first I'll take you through the front page, and they're all leading with the strike action. The Financial Times leads on warnings from NHS leaders that patient safety can't be guaranteed during these strikes. Those safety concerns are also the main focus of the Eye. The Guardian echoes that message from NHS bosses, saying that they're now asking the Prime Minister to enter the negotiations. The Telegraph focuses on the Health Secretary Steve Barclay, saying that unions are consciously making a decision to inflict harm. The Metro headline, "You'd better watch out," while the Times goes with "Avoid taking risks, public told as paramedics strike." The Star says advice over what to do and what not to do amounts to wrapping the public in cotton wool, while the Sun says don't have fun. The Mail asks a question of NHS staff: how will they live with themselves if people die today? The Mirror uses the struggle of staff in the NHS for a comment on the Conservative peer, Michelle Mone, while the Express tells us the military is going to be deployed. Their main story, though, as you can see there, Royal fell Christmas post-disaster, all about the postal service. All right, let's bring in Janelle and Joanna for a deeper look at some of those front page stories. Janelle, Joanna, good to have you with us. Let's start with you, Janelle, and with the front page of the Eye. This is leading off, of course, as we said, on warnings from NHS bosses of the risk that the public face due to the ambulance strikes.
Yeah, the public, obviously they're saying to people not to take risks. I think at any time it's good advice not to take risks you don't need to take. But I think it's just the state of where we've come to in terms of these negotiations at a complete standstill. Nurses, I don't think they get into their job to go on strike and to not look after patients. But they're at the point where there seems to be no other way that the government will listen about the pay conditions, about the conditions they're working under, which sound unsafe in any circumstance at the moment, because they are working in a really understaffed way. So I think in the sense of the blame sort of being laid at their door, like the headline, how will they feel if people die today? I think we know that people are dying because of long waiting lists, because of bed blocking, because of all these other things that have been going on for a longer time than just this strike. And so I think we can't put all the issues around these 2 days of the strike. We have to look at this in context, how we got here, and also how are we going to get out of this mess, because it's more than just the strikes. It's what are we going to go on to do to solve these problems that are chronic and look like there's no way out at the moment.
Yeah, and that headline you're mentioning, as we saw, was from the front page of the Daily Mail. John, you're not along to much of that, but I want to keep us moving along and look at the front page of the Guardian. Same story, but they've got a line here now that NHS bosses are urging the Prime Minister to intervene. We saw him at the liaison committee yesterday, sticking to the line, saying he's not going to get involved, but the calls will grow louder for him to do so.
Yes, and I actually think he should be intervening in this. I think the real danger, as far as I see it at the moment, is that the Prime Minister decides to turn this into a much bigger political contest, almost as if it's kind of role-playing the 1970s and 1980s, and as if he can rehabilitate the Conservative Party, internal battles within the Conservative Party that are perhaps going on by modelling himself upon Margaret Thatcher and scoring political points by defeating the strikers. But I actually think this is a very, very different climate to the 1970s and 1980s, and I think it would be a huge mistake for Rishi Sunak to go down that line and try and turn this into a political battle. I actually think, even though it seems a very extreme situation at the moment, the days that we're losing to strikes in total are nothing compared to the striking days that were lost during the 70s and 80s. I think it's just coming as a shock to us because we're not used to people going on strike. We've become quite complacent in recent years. And I also actually think that the pay demands that workers like nurses are making, they seem very huge when we talk about figures like 17%, 19% pay rise. But when you think that inflation is running at 10, 11, even 12%, then this pay rise is not that substantial differential above the rate of inflation, particularly when you take into account the fact that pay has remained at the same level for many nurses over a long period of time now.
Yeah, the government say that's unaffordable, of course. I'll be putting some of those points to Steve Barclay when I speak to him in about 20 minutes' time. Let's move on to the next front page, Janelle, with you. This is Daily Telegraph, and this is Steve Barclay, and his use of language here, saying that unions have made a conscious choice to inflict harm. I guess this sort of feeds into what Joanna was saying there, that this is really setting up the unions as being the aggressors, the militant group in this fight.
I don't know what the government are really trying to achieve by being so inflammatory. They should be de-escalating this situation. They should be finding a solution. They should not be going into the papers to kind of win the war on the front pages of the tabloids, of the papers. And I think it is should be a stain on their conscience that this is what they're choosing to do in these moments, rather than when they're in the room actually discuss the thing that people are, one of the things that people are striking over, which is pay, rather than choosing to say, well, you know, we've convened all these COBRA meetings. In the end, you have to talk to the people who are doing the job. You have to listen to the people who are doing the job and listen to what they're saying, because they are on the front line and they do know. And it's very interesting and also very easy as government ministers to kind of sit in a different room and talk about what needs to be done. The one thing is obviously the job and it becoming so many vacancies in the NHS that they're literally unfillable. And the other thing is about how are they sustaining or making a sustainable role for the future. How are we going to attract more nurses? You have to pay them properly. They have to be able to live, to be able to do their jobs. And so I think the government, you know, as Joanna just said, you know, if they're trying to set this up for a big fight, for a big ugly fight, I think they will lose the public opinion in the end. But more than that, I think we are going to lose more nurses in the sector, which is the last thing that we need. And I think they need to be a bit more responsible in how they're playing this game, because actually it's not a game.
And Joanna, let's get you to comment then on the Daily Mail front page. Janelle mentioned it earlier, and this is the Mail asking the question, how will NHS staff live with themselves if people die today? And this really speaks to the heart of it, doesn't it? Because people go into the health service to care for people, to look after those who are sick and are injured. So it's surprising and shocking, I guess, that we have reached this point where so many of them have decided to take strike action and walk off the job.
No, it absolutely is, and I think we do need to keep in mind that this is a sign of a severity of a situation. But I think you could throw the question in completely the opposite direction, and you could equally say, how will government ministers cope if people die today? How will they deal with their consciences? And how will the NHS managers deal with this on their consciences as well? I think, you know, the point of strikes is to be disruptive, and it's tragic that this has come to impact upon the medical service as well. And I think the advice about don't take risks is truly shocking advice. You know, in this day and age, we should be able to have fun before Christmas without worrying about whether there will be ambulance or healthcare support if something tragic and terrible goes completely wrong. You know, we should be able to do that. I think the other important point to make, you know, is that the nurses, they were there for us during lockdown. They were not sitting at working from home. They didn't have that luxury. They were out there on the wards, as were train drivers still keeping basic infrastructure of the country and postal services. You know, these people stepped up to the plate. They were there on the front line during the 2 years of the pandemic. They had our support then, and I think it's really important that they have our support then, support now, because they haven't made this financial mess that the country's in. You know, it was other people who took the decision to close down the economy entirely, pretty much, for 2 years, and to print money whilst doing it. And it seems to me that it's that combination of closing down the economy while printing money that's really caused this huge rise in inflation, and we're now paying the consequences.
Joanna, sorry to interrupt you. We have run short of time. Thanks very much. I know we're wearing red jumpers. I would have worn mine as well, but I was up here on Sky News Breakfast.